Good evening. Settle in and let the room grow quiet around you. Tonight, a question that has been sitting on your own skin your whole life. You are the only animal of your size on Earth that is naked. Every other great ape wears a coat of hair. The gorilla, the chimpanzee, the orangutan, all of them are covered. So is the horse, the lion, the deer, the wolf, the bear. Nearly every land mammal as large as you keeps its fur, its whole life, without question. And yet here you are, bare somewhere in the deep past. Your ancestors gave up the covering that every relative wears. No one knows exactly when. No one knows exactly why. That is the mystery we will hold in our hands tonight, turning it over slowly, looking at it from every side. Run your hand along your forearm. You will feel skin and warmth and almost nothing else. A few faint hairs, so fine you can barely see them at all. Now picture the arm of a chimpanzee. Thick, dark, covered in hair from the shoulder down to the wrist. You and that chimpanzee share an ancestor. Not so very long ago, in the deep clock of life, you were the same kind of creature. Somewhere along the way, one branch stayed covered. The other branch became you. And the strange thing, the thing we will keep returning to, is that no one can point to the exact moment it happened. No one can say, here, on this plane, in this age, the fur was lost. Let that sit for a moment. It is a mystery written on every body, in every bed, in every city tonight, and most people go a whole life without thinking to ask it. Your own bare skin is such an ordinary thing to you. You have lived inside it every day. You have washed it, dried it, felt the sun on it and the cold against it. It is the most familiar thing in the world. And yet it is one of the strangest things in the whole animal kingdom. There is nothing else quite like it among the creatures your size. You are an oddity, a puzzle, an exception to a rule that almost nothing else breaks. And tonight, without any hurry, we are going to sit with that puzzle. We are going to be patient with it. We are going to let it stay a mystery for as long as it wants to. Before we go any further, I always find myself wondering where you are right now. It might be late here and morning where you are. Somewhere a person is hearing this voice at breakfast, with the light coming grey and thin through a kitchen window. Somewhere else it is long past midnight, and the streets outside have gone silent, and the only sound is this. One of you is in a great noisy city, high up in a building full of strangers. Another is in a house at the end of a long road, with no neighbour for miles in any direction. Some of you have pulled the blankets close against a cold night. Wherever you are, whatever the hour, whatever the weather beyond your walls, you are welcome here. We are going to take our time tonight. There is nowhere we need to rush to. Just this one old question and the long, patient search for its answer. So let us begin where every good mystery begins, with the plain strangeness of the thing itself. Think about what fur is for. It is one of the oldest and most reliable inventions in the whole history of warm-blooded life. A coat of hair traps a thin layer of air against the skin. That trapped air holds the body's heat close, the way a pocket of heat is held under a blanket on a winter night. In the cold, fur is not a luxury. It is survival itself. It is why a wolf can lie down in falling snow and wake unharmed in the morning. It is why a mountain goat can stand all night on a frozen ledge, in a wind that would take your life in an hour, and feel nothing but the wind against the tips of its hair. Fur holds in the heat. Fur is a wall against the cold. For 100 million years in every climate on Earth, mammals have worn it, and it has kept them alive. But that is only the beginning of what a coat can do. Fur is also a shade against the sun, a roof carried everywhere the animal goes. Fur is armour against thorns and rough bark and the bites of small things. Fur is a hiding place, a canvas for stripes and spots that let an animal vanish into grass or dappled shade. Fur is where a mother's young cling and are carried. It sheds the rain, it cushions a fall, it works, in 100 ways at once, and it works so well that in 100 million years almost nothing has been willing to give it up. And that is what makes you such a puzzle. Because you did. There are only a handful of large land mammals on all the earth that went naked, and look at the strange company you keep. The elephant, the rhinoceros, the hippopotamus, and out in the ocean, the whale and the dolphin. Look closely at each one, because each has a clear reason for its bare skin. The whale and the dolphin left the land entirely and returned to the sea, and in the water a coat of fur only drags and slows a swimming body, so they gave it up for smoothness and grew a layer of fat inside instead. The elephant and the rhinoceros became so enormous that their bodies make heat faster than any coat could ever release it, so a full coat would slowly cook them from within. And the hippopotamus spends its long days sunk to the eyes in a river, needing no coat because the water keeps it. Every one of the naked giants has a reason that fits its whole way of life, like a key turning cleanly in a lock. But you are none of these things. You are not a giant. You are not a creature of the sea. You do not spend your days sunk in a river. You are a modest, medium-sized primate who walks upon the dry land, under the open sky, out in the wind and the weather. By every rule that governs all the other mammals, you should be covered in hair from crown to heel. And you are not. You are the one exception that breaks the whole pattern. Feel how odd that is. You are a rule breaker in your own skin, and you did not even choose it. It was chosen for you, long ago, by ancestors you will never meet, for reasons they could never have named. There is one more thing about you, standing there on the plain, that we have not yet named, and it changes everything about the light. You stand up. You walk on 2 legs, upright, tall, and an upright body meets the noon sun in a very different way than a body on 4 legs. Think about it slowly. A 4-legged animal at midday presents its whole long back to the sun directly overhead. The full length of it, from shoulder to tail, lies open to that vertical light, like a table laid out beneath a lamp. But you, standing straight, present only your head and your shoulders and the tops of your arms. The length of your long body falls away below into your own shade. At the fierce middle of the day, when the sun is highest and most dangerous, an upright creature catches far less of it than a creature on all 4s. Feel how those 2 things fit together, the standing up and the losing of the fur. Perhaps one made the other bearable. Once you stood tall, the noon sun struck only a small part of you, and a bare skin out under it became a thing you could survive. And notice which part of you took the sun straight on. The top of the head. The one place, of all places, where the thick dark hair stayed. That is not likely to be an accident. The hair kept its post exactly where the vertical sun fell hardest, a small dark roof left standing over the one part of you the shade could not reach. So the picture grows richer, a tall, upright creature, walking the open plain, there below and shaded by its own height, with a cap of hair guarding the crown against the light from straight above. And already, before we have even left the first hour of our mystery, you can feel how many separate threads must be woven together to make sense of a single naked body. The heat, the standing up, the angle of the light, the one patch of hair that stayed. No single thread explains it. Hold that. It is the truest thing we will learn tonight. There is a small detail here worth holding too, because it will matter later. That bare skin is not always permanent, even among the naked giants. Consider the elephant again. The elephant of the hot lands is nearly bare. But once, in the age of ice, there was another kind of elephant, the mammoth, and the mammoth was covered from trunk to tail in a deep shaggy coat, because it lived in a frozen world where a coat meant life. Same family, opposite skin. When the cold demanded fur, the elephant's line grew fur again. So the covering can come and go, back and forth across the ages, wherever the world pushes hard enough. Hair is not a one-way door. Keep that in mind. It tells us the loss of your own fur was not some strange accident that could never be undone. It was an answer to a pressure. And to understand the loss, we have to find the pressure. Now here is where it grows stranger yet, because you did not actually lose your hair, not the way you might think. If you took a strong lens and looked closely at your own skin, the back of your hand, your shoulder, your thigh, you would find that it is not bare at all. It is covered everywhere in tiny follicles, the little pits and roots from which each hair grows. And if you counted them patiently over the whole surface of your body, you would arrive at a number close to the number a chimpanzee carries, roughly the same count of follicles, roughly the same spacing, spread across roughly the same body. The chimpanzee's follicles each grow a thick, dark, visible hair, and so the chimpanzee is covered. Your follicles grow a hair so fine, so short, so pale, that from even a single step away your skin looks smooth and empty and clean. So the mystery is not that you lost the follicles. You kept every one of them. The mystery is why the hair they grow became almost invisible. Picture that carefully. A body that kept every place where hair should be and simply turned the hair itself down to a whisper. As if the old plan for a full coat was never torn up and thrown away, only quieted, only hushed, until the skin showed through beneath it. So the question sharpens into its true and final shape. Not why did your ancestors lose the follicles, because they did not. But why did your line, alone among all the apes, let the hair go so fine and faint that the bare skin came through? What was so precious about bare skin that it was worth muting the oldest and most useful coat in the entire mammal world? That is the true shape of tonight's puzzle, and every path we walk leads back to it. And to begin to answer it, we have to leave this snug room and go somewhere very hot and very dry and very far away and very long ago. We have to go to Africa. And we have to go back a very, very long way. Picture a wide grassland lying under a high white sun. This is the world where your line was slowly made, not a jungle, not a green forest, but an open savanna, stretching flat and gold to a distant line of blue hills. Picture it. The grass is dry and pale and comes up to the knee, and it hisses when the wind moves through it. Scattered trees stand alone here and there, each one throwing a small hard pool of shade onto the ground beneath it. The soil between the grasses is cracked and baked. The air over the land shimmers and wavers in the heat of the middle of the day, so that the far hills seem to float and tremble. There is the smell of dust and dry grass, and somewhere the distant dryness of animals. This is the place. This is where, somewhere between 2 and 3 million years ago, your ancestors were becoming something the world had never seen. They were standing up onto 2 legs. They were walking upright across the open ground. And they were, we believe, beginning to lose their fur. The oldest and most famous idea about why is also the simplest. It is a story about heat. So let us follow that story out onto the plain and see how far it can carry us. On the open savanna, the greatest danger in the middle of the day is not the lion, and it is not hunger, it is the sun itself. A body working hard under a high sun builds up heat inside far faster than you might believe. Every muscle that moves burns fuel to move, and the burning of fuel makes heat, always, as surely as a fire makes heat. And that heat has to go somewhere. It has to leave the body, and quickly, or the heat climbs and climbs inside until it reaches a level the living body cannot survive. This is the oldest problem of the hot plain. Not how to get heat, how to be rid of it, how to throw the heat away before it kills you. For almost every animal, the answer to that problem is the same, and it is a simple one. Do not work hard in the heat of the day. Take the shade when the sun is high, move in the cool of the dawn and the cool of the dusk, and lie down through the burning hours between. And so the savanna, at noon, goes almost entirely motionless. The lions sprawl in the shade of a thorn bush and sleep. The antelope stand close together under the trees, heads low, barely moving, only their tails switching at flies. The birds go silent. The whole wide world lies down and waits out the burning of the day. Feel that hush. Feel the whole plain holding its breath under the weight of the sun, everything waiting for the cool to come again. Now imagine a single creature that did the opposite, a creature that could move and keep moving through the very hours when everything else lay down and could not. Imagine what such a creature could do. It could walk out into the empty burning middle of the day, when the great hunters were sleeping and the prey stood drowsy in the shade, and it would have the whole hot world entirely to itself. No lion would trouble it, for the lions were asleep. The prey would be slow and heavy and half dozing with heat. The noon, which was death to everything else, would become this one creature's own private hour. That is a strange and powerful gift. And that, the oldest story says, is exactly the gift your ancestors seized, and to seize it, they needed a way to shed heat that no other large animal on that plain possessed. They needed to lose the very coat that trapped their heat against them, and they needed to find, in its place, another way entirely to cool the body down. The way they found was water. Feel your own skin now, in a heated room, and you may feel the faintest trace of it, even now. Sweat, the most human water there is. You are, in a way you rarely notice, a masterpiece of cooling. Your skin is threaded through, everywhere, with tiny sweat glands. Not a few of them. Not 1,000. You carry somewhere between 2 and 3 million of these tiny glands, scattered across almost the entire surface of your body, from your brow to the soles of your feet. Let that number sit with you a moment. 2 to 3 million tiny wells of water, waiting in your skin. No other primate on Earth comes anywhere close. A chimpanzee has sweat glands too, but far fewer, and the ones it has work in a slower, weaker, older way. You are different. You are drenched from head to foot in the fine machinery of cooling. When you grow hot, these millions of glands open all at once, and water rises up out of them to the surface of the skin and spreads across it in a thin, invisible film, and there it turns from water into vapour and lifts away into the air. And here is the beautiful hidden part, the part that makes it all work. When water turns from a liquid into a vapour, it must drink in heat to do it. It pulls that heat out of whatever surface it is leaving behind. So each faint drop of your sweat, as it dries from your skin, carries away with it a small parcel of your body's own heat, lifting that heat up and off you and into the sky. 2 million tiny doors, all thrown open at once. 2 million small pumps, each one pulling heat out of your blood and handing it to the air. This is happening on your skin, in some small measure even now. It is one of the most constant things your body does, and it is one of the rarest gifts in all the animal world. But it is not a free gift. Nothing on the plane is free. Every drop of that cooling water has to come from somewhere, and it comes from inside you, out of your own blood, out of the water you carry in every part of your body. Sweat hard through a long African afternoon, and you can pour out litres of it, more water than you would think a body could spare. And so the naked sweating creature became, forever after, a creature that must drink. That is the hidden cost written into your cooling. A furred animal, at ease in the shade, can go a long while between drinks. But you, out in the heat, streaming water off your bare skin hour after hour, must return again and again to the river. The spring, the water hole, or the heat will win. So the loss of the fur did not only make you a runner, it tied you on a short invisible leash to water. It sent you back always to the green edges of things, to the places where water rose out of the ground, and with the water went salt too, carried out in the sweat, so that a body cooling itself this way must find salt as well, and crave it, and seek it. You can even now feel the whole ancient arrangement in your own body on a hot day. The sweat on your skin, the thirst that follows it, the faint taste of salt on your lip. That thirst is 1,000,000 years old. It is the price of the coat you gave away, and you pay it, unseen, every hot day of your life. And here is a curious thing your body did to ease that other cost. The cost of the cold. When the fur went, you did not go entirely undefended against the chill. You grew a second coat, a hidden one, on the inside. Pressed gently on your own arm, your side, the back of your hand. Beneath the skin there is a layer of fat, a smooth continuous padding bonded close to the underside of the skin, all over you. And this too is unusual. The other apes are lean beneath their fur, they wear their heat on the outside, in the coat. You wear a good part of yours on the inside, in that layer of fat just under the bare skin. It is a hidden kind of insulation, a blanket sewn into the lining of you, holding a little of your heat in against the night that your lost fur can no longer hold. It is not enough on its own. It never was. You will always need the fire, the clothing, the shelter. But it is something. As the outer coat thinned away, an inner one thickened to take a little of its place. Your body did not simply strip itself bare and leave it at that. It made a trade and hedged the trade, and left you this hidden lining as a small mercy against the cold you had chosen. Now feel why the fur had to go. Imagine trying to do all of this cooling underneath a thick coat of hair. The sweat would rise from the skin, yes, but then it would soak straight into the fur and sit there, trapped, deep in the coat, unable to reach the open air, unable to dry, unable to carry its heat away at all. A wet coat is a useless coat, worse than useless. It clings to the body, it cannot dry, it holds the heat in against the skin instead of letting it escape. Any animal that tried to sweat under a full coat would only make itself hotter and more soaked, and gain nothing. For the sweating trick to work, the water must reach open air. It must spread across a bare surface and dry away freely into the moving breeze. And so, the story says, the two great inventions came together, hand in hand, each one making the other worth having. The sweat glands multiplied, the fur thinned. More sweat made bare skin more useful. Barer skin made sweat more useful. Round and round, over an unimaginable span of time, until you were left with a naked, sweating skin, cooled by evaporation, able to work and move and hunt through the noon heat that stopped every other animal cold in its tracks. Picture one of them now, just one of your own distant ancestors, out on the plain in the full white light of the middle of the day. Picture the long legs, the upright body, the dark bare skin. The dry grass is hot underfoot. The sun is a real weight upon the shoulders and the top of the head. But the body does not overheat and does not have to lie down, because the skin is bare and the sweat is rising from a million tiny wells, and the heat is streaming away off the body invisibly into the air, moment by moment, as fast as the walking makes it. All around, the lions sleep. The antelopes stand heavy and dull in the thin shade of the trees, and this one creature moves steady and unhurried through a world that has lain down all around it. That is the picture at the very heart of the oldest answer to our mystery. Hold it. It is a good picture, and a true one as far as it goes. And it leads us next into something even larger, because if you can move through the heat that stops all others, then you can do a thing that almost no other animal on earth can do. You can chase. And you can catch. But that only deepens the question rather than closing it. For the more we learn about how gracefully your body sheds its heat, the stranger it seems that mere cooling, all on its own, could have stripped away the oldest coat in the mammal world. Hold that thought. We are only at the beginning of the long night. And wherever you are hearing this, in a snug bed as the rain comes down, or in a still house while a city sleeps around you, or somewhere far off where the day is only now beginning, stay with me here on the plain a little longer. There is no hurry at all. We have all the night we need. Let us stay out on that golden plain a while longer. Because the story of the chase is one of the most extraordinary things your body can do, even now, even tonight, as you lie in the dark. It is written into you, this ability, sleeping in your long legs and your bare skin and your steady breath, and it may be one of the deepest reasons you are shaped the way you are. You are, whether you have ever thought of yourself this way or not, one of the greatest distance runners in the entire animal kingdom. Not the fastest, no, almost nothing is slower than a human being over a short sprint. A dog will outrun you easily. A house cat will outrun you. A deer, a horse, a rabbit, an antelope, nearly anything on 4 legs will leave you far behind in a sudden burst of speed. Over 100 paces, you are among the slowest large animals alive on the earth. It is almost embarrassing how slow you are over a short distance. But here is the secret the plain teaches. The race is not always won by the swift. Over distance, over long hours, over many miles, in the full heat of the open day, something remarkable begins to happen. The animals that were so much faster than you begin, one by one, to fail. And you, slow as you are, keep going. Here is why. Think carefully about how a large 4-legged animal must cool itself as it runs. A dog cools by panting, throwing off heat through its open mouth and its wide wet tongue. A horse sweats a little, but even the horse must mostly open its mouth and breathe hard and fast to shed the heat of hard running. And here is the crucial thing, the thing that changes everything. Panting and galloping cannot happen at the same time. When a 4-legged animal runs at full stretch, its whole gut swings back and forth inside it like a heavy piston, forward and back with every single bound, and that swinging weight drives the breath in and out in a fixed and unbreakable rhythm. 1 breath for every stride, in and out with every leap. The animal cannot break that rhythm to pant while it gallops, because the machinery of its own body will not let it. And so, while it is running fast, the galloping animal cannot cool itself at all. It can run, and run fast, but only for a while, and then it must stop, it must halt and stand and pant and let the built-up heat pour off it, before it can ever run hard again. You have no such chain upon you. None. You do not cool by breathing at all. You cool by sweating, over your whole vast bare skin, all the time, whether you are lying motionless or walking or running at your full pace. You can run and cool your body in the very same moment, without the smallest conflict between the two. And your breathing is not locked to your stride, because you run upright on two legs and your body does not swing like a pendulum with each step. You can breathe fast or slow, deep or shallow, entirely as you please, no matter how your legs are moving. So while the fast animal must stop and stand and cool, you never have to stop at all. You simply keep going. Slow, steady, tireless, cool. Feel the power in that. Now picture the hunt. Picture it slowly, exactly the way it must have happened 10,000 times over 100,000 years out on those ancient plains. A small band of your ancestors out in the heat of the middle of the day. They pick out one single animal from a distant herd. A large one. An antelope, some early kind of gazelle, heavy with meat. They do not sprint at it. They know better than that. They simply begin to follow it. The animal, seeing them come, bounds away, fast and easy and graceful, and vanishes over the rise ahead in a few seconds. And the people walk after it. They walk and jog and walk again, following the tracks pressed into the dust. Following the bent and broken grass, reading the ground the way you would read a page. And think what that reading asks of a mind. The animal is not in sight. It ran over the rise and vanished long ago. So to follow it, you must hold it in your head, imagine where it went, and why, and how afraid it was, and which way a frightened animal turns. You must look at a scuff in the dust and see, behind it, the living creature that made it, moving, somewhere ahead, out of sight. That is a strange and powerful thing for a mind to do. To track is to imagine. To follow the unseen animal is to build a picture of a world you cannot see, and to trust it enough to walk toward it. Some believe this very act, repeated across 10,000 hunts, helped to shape the deep human gift for reading signs, for guessing at hidden causes, for telling the story of what is not in front of your eyes. The bare skin sent you running after the antelope, and the running after the unseen antelope may have helped to teach you to think. And after a time they find the animal again, standing in the shade of a tree, cooling its overheated body in the only way it can. And they start it running once more, before it has finished cooling. It bounds away again, fast and easy as before. And again, patiently, they follow. At their steady, tireless, sweating, walking pace, on and on, through the noon heat that no galloping animal can endure for long. Feel the slow inevitability of it. There is no violence in it yet, only patience. Every single time the animal runs, it builds up heat inside that it cannot shed while it is moving, and every single time the people reappear over the rise, it must run again, before it has cooled from the last time. Hour after hour under the high white sun, the heat builds and builds inside the animal's body with nowhere to go. And in the bodies of the people, all the while the sweat rises and dries and rises and dries again, carrying the heat away just as fast as the walking makes it, so that they hold cool and steady through the whole long afternoon. Until at last, somewhere in the late light, the animal can go no further. It stands, swaying, its body burning from the inside out, brought down in the end not by any spear and not by any speed, and not by any strength, but simply by heat. By the sun, by the one thing the people had learned to carry lightly, and the animal could not. This slow hunt has a name, It is called persistence hunting, and a few peoples on Earth were doing it within living memory, running antelope and kudu to exhaustion under the African sun, on foot, on bare skin, on nothing but patience and sweat. Let me set you down inside one of those ancient days now, from its first light to its last, and let you wear that bare skin for a while yourself. Picture the dawn. You wake on the open ground with the others, in the grey before the sun, and the air is cold, colder than you would like, and you are glad of the low fire that someone kept alive through the dark. You crouch near it, the heat touches your bare arms and your bare back, and you turn slowly, the way you would turn a thing before a flame, heating one side and then the other. This is the price of your naked skin, felt first thing, every morning of your life. You have no coat to wake up in. You must find your heat, or make it. Then the sun lifts over the far hills, and the cold burns off the grass, and the plain begins to breathe. Now the day opens, and it is yours in a way it is no other creature's. Feel the sun climb, feel it grow from a comfort into a weight. By the middle of the day it lies heavy on your shoulders and the crown of your head, and the light off the pale grass is fierce in your eyes. All around you the animals are lying down, going still, seeking the shade. But you do not have to. You walk out into the open, into the very hour that stops the whole world, and the plain is empty and shimmering and yours. The sweat rises on your skin and dries in the moving air, and the heat streams off you, and you feel almost weightless in it, cool inside your own bare body, while everything else lies gasping in the shade. You are the one animal awake in the burning noon. Walk a while in that. Feel how strange and lonely and free it is. This is what the bare skin bought. And then the long light comes, and the sun leans down toward the hills, and the plain turns gold, and the animals rise again to graze in the cool. And you turn back, at last, toward the others, toward the water, toward the place where the fire waits, because now the day's gift begins to turn into the day's cost. Feel the air change as the sun goes down. Feel the first breath of the coming cold on your bare arms, where a furred animal would feel nothing at all. The plain that was your kingdom at noon becomes, at night, a place you are not truly built for. And so you gather close. You bring the fire up, you pull the others near, and press together for the shared heat of many bodies, and perhaps you draw over yourself the skin of some animal you took, the borrowed coat you did not grow. And you wait out the cold dark, as every other creature waited out the hot bright day. That is the whole bargain, lived across a single day, the bare skin that gives you the burning noon, and takes from you the freezing night. Hold that full day in your mind, the cold waking, the free and shining noon, the gathering at dusk. You have just lived, in a few breaths, the deepest trade your body ever made. Now here is why all of this matters so deeply for our mystery. If this is true, if your ancestors truly became the runners of the long, hot, patient chase, then the bare skin was not some small change to the body. It was the very thing that made an entire way of living possible. The whole hunt hangs upon it. Without the sweating, without the nakedness, the chase falls apart in the first mile. You would overheat and stagger and stop, exactly like the antelope, like every other animal on the plain. So in this telling, the loss of your fur was never a loss at all. It was the price you paid for a kind of superpower. The power to keep moving through the very heat that stops the entire animal world in its tracks. Endurance itself, bought and paid for with bare skin and a million wells of sweat. It is a beautiful idea, and it fits so very much. It explains the millions of sweat glands which are real and which no other story can wave away. It explains why you, slow and weak as you are, can run for hours over ground that a far stronger and faster animal could never cross without stopping. It explains why the great change happened in Africa, in the heat, out on the open ground, and not in some cold northern forest. For many years this was the answer most people gave, and it remains tonight one of the strongest answers we have. Hold it a while, let it feel solid under you. And there is one more thing the cooling may have brought you, the most precious thing of all, and it is riding just behind your eyes. Your brain. Think about what your brain is, as a piece of the body. It is small, but it burns fuel like almost nothing else you carry. 1/5 of all the energy your body spends, it spends on that one small handful of tissue inside your skull, and burning that much fuel makes that much heat. Your brain runs hot, always, and it is delicate, and it does not endure overheating well at all. A brain that grows too hot begins to fail, to swim, to falter. Now lay that fact beside the great story of your line, because across the very same deep stretch of time when the fur was thinning and the sweat glands were multiplying, your ancestors' brains were growing, swelling generation by generation, larger and larger, into the great hungry thinking organ you carry now. And a larger brain makes more heat, and needs more cooling, and can less afford to overheat. So perhaps the bare, sweating skin did not only let you run, perhaps it also kept your growing brain from cooking itself as it grew. Perhaps the naked skin was, in part, what made the great brain possible at all, a cooling system built first for the running body, and then, by good fortune, exactly what a swelling brain most needed. It is only an idea, but sit with it a moment, that the very thing that let you think these thoughts, tonight, in the dark, may trace back to the losing of your fur. And yet, here is where a careful and honest mind begins to press upon the story, the way you press upon a floorboard in an old house to see whether it will hold your weight. Because the heat idea, for all its beauty and all its power, leaves a few things unexplained, and those few unexplained things are exactly where the deeper mystery lives. Consider this. Losing your fur does keep you cool through the burning day, yes, but it also leaves you dangerously bitterly cold when the sun goes down. And the savanna is not mild around the clock. Far from it. When the sun sinks below the hills, the open grassland can turn shockingly cold, because there is no cloud and no canopy and no cover to hold the day's heat close to the ground, and so all that gathered heat escapes straight up into the clear black sky and is gone. A furred animal sleeps through that cold in comfort, wrapped in its own coat, needing nothing. A bare animal shivers under the same stars and loses heat and suffers and must find some other way to survive the dark. So bare skin is a bargain with two faces. It buys you the day, it costs you the night, and that raises a real and stubborn question, one that will not go away. Was the cooling of the day truly worth so much that it was worth freezing through every night to have it? Some who study this most closely are honestly not sure. They point out reasonably that there were other and simpler ways to stay cool in the heat that would not have cost you the night at all. You could have taken the shade at noon, exactly as almost every other animal does, and kept your thick coat for the cold dark hours. You did not strictly need to hunt through the very worst of the heat. And they point out one more thing, a thing we will come back to again and again all night, like a bell that keeps ringing softly in the distance. There is a very great deal that we do not know about exactly when the fur was lost, and without knowing the when, it becomes very hard to be certain about the why. The two questions are chained together. Loosen one, and the other slips away. So let the heat idea stand, for now, as our first strong suspect. But not as our only one, and not yet as our answer. It explains the sweat. It explains the running. It may well turn out to be the largest single part of the whole truth. But it does not, all by itself, close the case and send us to sleep. And that unfinished quality, that little gap it leaves, is exactly what keeps us turning the puzzle over in our hands, here in the dark. Because there is a clue, a strange, small, clever clue that lets us begin at last to pin down that stubborn question of the when. And here is where it gets stranger. Because this clue comes from the very last place on earth you would think to look. It comes from lice. Let me tell you about the lice, because it is truly one of the most surprising pieces of detective work in this entire story, and it turns upon one simple and clever idea. Sometimes, when you cannot find the answer by looking straight at the thing itself, you can find it instead by looking closely at what lives upon the thing, at the small passengers it carries. They have their own history, and sometimes their history reveals the history of their host. A louse is a small wingless insect that lives on the body of a larger animal and feeds upon it. And lice, above almost all other creatures, are exquisitely fussy and particular. Over long, long ages, each kind of louse becomes suited to one single exact home. It adapts, slowly, to one particular animal, to one particular kind of hair, to one particular patch of living skin, until in the end it can no longer live anywhere else in the whole world. It becomes a prisoner of its own perfect fit. And this deep fussiness is the key that unlocks the clue. Because it means the history of the lice is tangled up, inseparably, with the history of the very body they live upon. Change the body, and you change the lice. And the lice remember, now you carry lice, or rather your kind does, and has done for a very long time indeed. And here is the strange and telling thing about them. Human beings do not carry just one single kind of louse. We carry more than one, and they live in different places upon the body, and they do not mix, and they do not cross from one place to the other. There is the louse that lives up in the hair of your head, among the follicles that never fell silent. And there is another kind, a close cousin of the first, closely related but genuinely distinct, that lives not upon the skin of your body at all, but down in your clothing. It comes out only to feed, and then it retreats, and it lays its small eggs in the seams and the folds and the gathered cloth of the very things you wear. The head louse and the clothing louse. Two close cousins, living two entirely separate lives upon the single body of one bare human being. Now think carefully about what that clothing louse needs, absolutely needs, in order to exist at all. It needs clothing. It lives in clothes. It breeds in clothes. It hides and lays its eggs in clothes. A creature so perfectly suited to a life spent inside garments could not have existed at all before there were garments for it to live inside. That is plain. That is certain. Which means that somewhere back in the long past there must have been a single moment, a threshold, when the clothing louse first split away from the head louse and began to become its own separate kind of thing. A moment when one line of lice left the head and moved down into the strange new world of draped and wrapped clothing, and never came back. And that moment, that split, could only ever have happened once your ancestors had begun to wear clothes. The clothing louse is, in a real sense, a tiny living clock. And that clock began to tick on the very day the first garment was worn against a human body. And here is the truly wonderful part. We can read that clock. Deep inside every living thing there is a kind of slow-running record, a steady, patient accumulation of tiny changes in the innermost material of life. Changes that pile up at a fairly regular rate, generation after generation, age after age. It is a little like the slow drip of water building a shape in a cave. By comparing the head louse and the clothing louse side by side, and by carefully counting how far apart the two have drifted since they parted ways, we can estimate how long ago that parting happened. How long ago, in other words, the first clothes were worn upon the earth. Now follow the chain of reasoning all the way, link by link, because it is beautiful, and because it leads us straight back to the fur we have been chasing all night. Why would any creature ever begin to wear clothes in the first place? Almost certainly because its bare skin had grown cold. An animal wrapped in its own thick natural fur has no need whatsoever of a garment. It is already dressed, from birth, in the finest coat there is. Only a naked animal, an animal that had already lost its own covering, would ever find a reason to drape itself in the shed skins of other, furrier creatures, seeking their borrowed heat against the night. So the wearing of clothes tells us something precious. It tells us that by the time the first clothes were made and worn, the fur was already long gone. The clothing was never an addition. It was a replacement. You do not go to the trouble of replacing a coat you are already wearing. So the clothing louse hands us a lower boundary, a firm line drawn across the deep flow of time. And on one clear point, we can now speak with real confidence. The fur was gone before that line. When the studies were done and the little louse clock was carefully read, the answer that came back placed the first clothing at somewhere around 100,000 years ago, with some readings pushing the figure further out, back toward 170,000 years, and the details argued over and refined as the work goes on. But the core message is steady enough to hold on to through all the argument. By at least 100,000 years ago, and quite possibly a good deal earlier, your ancestors already stood bare enough beneath the open sky that they needed to wrap themselves against the cold. And think about where and when that wrapping would have mattered most. Not back on the hot African plain, where the bare skin was made, but out at the far edges of the world, where your ancestors wandered in the long, slow spreading of your kind, up into the cold north, into the time of the great ice, when winters came down hard and white over the land. A bare body cannot cross a frozen world. It simply cannot. So the very act of making that first coat, of scraping an animal's hide and drawing it over the shoulders, may have been the thing that let your naked ancestors walk into lands their bare skin could never otherwise have survived. The clothing was not a small comfort. It was a key that unlocked half the earth. With borrowed fur upon their backs, the furless people could go where no furless creature had any right to go, into the cold, into the ice, into the winter, and out across the whole wide world. And the little clothing louse followed them every step of the way, breeding in the seams, keeping its silent count of the years since the first coat was drawn on. Feel how strange and lovely that is, when you sit with it, a tiny, humble insect, hiding away in the seams of the world's first garments, faithfully recording the very moment that its great naked host stood shivering under the stars and first reached for a covering. The louse cannot tell us why the fur was lost. It knows nothing of heat or hunting or beauty. But it can help us fence in the when, and here is the crucial thing to carry forward into the dark. The when that the louse gives us is a floor, and not a ceiling. It is a lower limit. It tells us the fur was surely gone by then. It says nothing at all, about how very long the fur might already have been gone before that. And that gap, that silence, is where the mystery grows deepest of all. Because 100,000 years, strange as it may sound to say it, is recent. It is late in the story of your line. It is very nearly the last chapter. And most who study this closely have come to believe that the fur was lost long, long before that. Perhaps a full 1,000,000 years earlier, and perhaps even more. The louse only ever tells us the fur was already gone by the time of the first clothes. It cannot tell us how long it had already been gone by then. And so, between the true loss of the fur and the making of that first crude coat, there may lie an enormous, silent, empty gulf of time. Hundreds of thousands of years. Very possibly more than 1,000,000. A vast, dark, unwitnessed stretch of your own story, over which no clue we have yet found casts even the faintest light. Sit a moment in the size of that darkness. It is humbling. It is where the answer hides. And you might ask, very reasonably, lying there, why not simply dig the answer up out of the ground? Why can we not find, somewhere in the old earth, the bones of an ancestor, and simply look and see whether the body was furred or bare? Here is the deep heartbreak that sits at the centre of this whole long search. Skin does not last. Hair does not last. When a body falls upon the old savanna, and the slow years begin to pass over it, the soft flesh goes first, and then the skin goes, and then the hair goes with it, all of it dissolving, returning to the earth and the air, long, long before anything can be turned to stone and preserved. What lasts across those unimaginable spans of time is bone. Hard, patient, mineral bone, and bone can tell us a great deal, more than you would think. It can tell us how tall your ancestors stood, and how they walked, and what they ate, and how their brains grew large across the ages. But bone cannot tell us the one thing we most long to know. Bone cannot tell us whether the body it once held up was covered thick in hair or laid bare and dark to the open wind. The single thing we most want to see is the single thing that time refuses to keep for us. And so the very heart of the mystery, the actual living skin of the actual living creature, is gone, utterly and forever, and we are left standing outside it, reasoning our way inward from the edges, from the sweat glands, from the lice, from the colour of skin, from the shape of the ancient land and the pattern of the ancient light, from a ring of clues that circle the answer, always, without ever once quite touching it. Which is exactly, precisely why it remains a mystery. Not because no one has ever thought hard about it. Countless brilliant minds have spent their lives upon it. It remains a mystery because the direct and simple evidence, the skin itself, rotted away into the African soil 1,000,000 years and more before any creature on earth was able to stand up and ask the question. Before we go on into the second half of the night, let me pause here with you again, just for a breath or two. However far into the dark you have come with me now, wherever you are lying or sitting, in whatever city or house or room, at whatever hour glows on your clock, I am glad you are here, turning this old question over with me. We have come to about the middle of the deep of it now. There is no hurry at all, none. Let your body grow heavy and easy against whatever holds it. And let us keep on, patiently, turning the puzzle in the low light, because there is another clue waiting for us. And this one is written not in the lice and not in the bone, but in the very colour of the skin itself. And it may be the clearest single fingerprint that the lost fur ever left behind, anywhere in all the long record of your kind. Think now about a thing that a coat of fur does that we have not yet named tonight. Besides holding in the heat, besides pressing it against the body, a thick coat of hair does something else entirely, something you almost never stop to think about. It blocks the sun. Not the heat of the sun, but the light of the sun, and in particular, a certain invisible part of that light, a fierce, unseen part that can do real and lasting harm to the living skin lying beneath it. A thick coat of hair is a shade that a body carries everywhere it goes, a private roof of its own, held always between the sky and the tender skin. Under all that hair, the skin of a furred animal stays pale, and protected in a kind of permanent shadow, never touched directly by the full harsh light of the open equatorial sky. Now think, slowly, about what must happen the very moment that fur begins to thin and fall away. Suddenly, for the first time in the long history of your entire line, the bare surface of the living body stands directly out under the African sun, with nothing at all between it and that harsh invisible light. Nothing, and that light, when it is unshielded, is genuinely dangerous to living tissue. It burns the surface. It reaches down and damages the delicate machinery just beneath. Over the years of a life, it can slowly break apart the very substances the body most needs to keep. A pale, unprotected skin, out on the open equatorial plain, under that vertical sun, all day, every day, season upon season, that is a living body held under a constant, invisible assault, from the moment it wakes to the moment it sleeps. So the very instant your ancestors lost the shade of their fur, they needed urgently a new shade to replace it. And the body, wonderfully, had one ready to give. Deep within the skin there live special cells whose whole task is to make a dark pigment, a natural brown-black colouring that soaks up the dangerous light like a sponge and absorbs its harm safely, high up in the surface, before it can ever reach down to the delicate living depths below. The more of this dark pigment the skin makes, the deeper and richer its colour becomes, and the better it shields all the precious life that lies beneath. Under the fierce sun of Africa, a dark skin is not merely a colour. It is armour. It is a shield. It is the body's own parasol, grown directly into the surface of itself, protecting the life within from the fire of the light above. It is a beautiful and a life-giving thing. And now watch how neatly this locks together with everything else we have seen tonight. If your distant furred ancestors were anything like the other great apes now living, and they surely were, then the skin hidden beneath their fur was very probably pale, pinkish, lightly coloured, unpigmented, exactly the way a chimpanzee's skin is pale and pink beneath its dark covering hair. They had no need of dark skin at all, because the fur itself was doing all the shielding for them. The coat was the parasol. But the very moment that fur thinned and the bare skin was exposed to the full equatorial sun, everything changed. Pale skin became a danger, a liability, a slow wound, and dark skin became a shield, a treasure, a source of life and health. And so, as the fur was lost across the generations, the skin beneath it must have darkened, steadily, child by child, age by age, until the bare bodies of your ancestors stood deeply and richly dark. The one colour that could best survive under the light they now stood naked beneath. The losing of the fur and the darkening of the skin were not two separate events. They were two halves of one single event, chained together. And here is why that chaining is such a precious clue for us tonight. It means that if we can only find out when your ancestors' skin first turned dark, then we will have found, at the very same stroke, when the fur was lost. The two are welded together. You cannot have one without the other. A furred ape, sheltered under its coat, has no need of dark skin. A bare ape, exposed under the tropical sun, cannot long survive without it. So the two must have arrived together, hand in hand, and the timing of the one gives us, at last, the timing of the other. And there is a way, faint but real, to reach back and touch at that timing. The inner machinery that makes the skin dark is written down deep in the innermost instructions of the body, and those instructions, like the lice, carry their own slow history within them. When careful scholars trace the particular version of those instructions that produces dark, protective skin, the version made for shielding a bare body against the tropical sun, the trail they followed ran back a very, very long way indeed. Not 100,000 years, not 200,000, The signs point back well over 1,000,000 years, perhaps toward 1.5 million, perhaps even beyond. And that is a stunning thing to lie in the dark and sit with, because if the skin turned dark that very long ago, then the fur that once shaded it, the fur we have been chasing all night, must have been thinning away at around that same immensely distant time. Not 100,000 years ago, as the lonely evidence of the lice might have tempted us to guess, but 10 or 12 or 15 times further back than that. Deep. Deep in the past, deeper than almost anyone ever imagines. Feel the two clues now, pulling against one another in your mind, and feel how they do not truly disagree. The lice say, firmly, the fur was surely gone by 100,000 years ago. The skin says, in its turn, the fur may well have begun its long vanishing more than 1,000,000 years before even that. And both of these can be perfectly true at the very same time, because the lice, remember, only ever gave us a flaw, a lower limit, a latest possible date. The skin does not contradict it. The skin simply lifts the whole story up and carries it down into the deep past, into the age of an ancestor far, far older than your own kind of human. An ancestor who already walked upright across the plains on long striding legs, who already ran and sweated through the noon heat, and who may already, more than 1,000,000 years ago, have stood there bare and dark and cooling beneath the enormous unbroken sky. That is the strongest single thread we have for the great question of the when. Not a firm and final date, we may never have that, but a direction and a depth, deep, deeper than most people ever dream when they first wonder about it. So very deep that the loss of the fur belongs, most likely, not to your own kind of human at all, but to an ancestor who came a very long time before you, one whose face you would not quite recognize if you met it, and whose bare, dark, sweating skin was nonetheless already, unmistakably, the beginning of the skin you are wearing tonight. Let us try, gently, to picture that ancestor, because it helps to have a face for the mystery, even a face half in shadow. Set aside the low, small, hairy thing you might imagine when you hear the word ape. This creature stood tall. It was long in the leg, built for striding and for the long endurance of the day. Its body was nearly your own height, its stride nearly your own stride, its walk upright and easy across the open ground. It carried tools of stone, it knew fire, or was learning it. And its skin, if the clue of the colour is true, was already bare, and already dark, more than 1,000,000 years ago, long before your own kind of human had come into the world at all. That is the strange and moving thing to hold. The nakedness is not a recent human fashion. It is far older than humanity itself. It was handed down to you, already made, by a forerunner who lived and ran and died on the African plains an unimaginable time ago, and who never knew the creature you would become. You inherited your bare skin the way you inherited the shape of your hand and the reach of your stride. From deep, deep back. From before, you were you. And the number itself, when the scholars trace the inner machinery of the dark skin, keeps landing in the same astonishing place. Not 100,000 years, not 500,000, somewhere past 1,000,000, perhaps around 1,200,000, perhaps more, the trail of that dark skin instruction runs back and back to an age so remote that it swallows all of written history 1,000 times over and is barely begun. Let the size of that settle over you. Everything you have ever heard of, every city, every empire, every story ever told, happened in the last thin sliver of the time since your ancestors first stood bare. The nakedness was already ancient when the very first word was ever spoken. Try for a moment to feel the true size of that gulf of time, because it is part of the awe of the whole thing. A single human life is a handful of decades. The oldest tales your people tell reach back a few thousand years, and already they feel impossibly far away, half lost in legend. Now take that whole span, all of recorded history, everything ever written down, and lay it to end, and then understand that it would fit many hundreds of times over into the time since your ancestors first stood bare on the plain. Generation after generation after generation, more than you could count if you counted all night, each one being born and living and raising its children and passing on, every one of them already naked, already dark, already sweating in the sun, already gathering at a fire against the cold. An unbroken line of bare-skinned lives reaching back and back and back, past every king and every city and every story, into a silence so deep that no memory and no word survives from it at all. And you are the near end of that line, the living tip of it. Everything those countless bare bodies were and did and endured has come down, along that impossibly long thread, to you, lying here tonight, in your own bare skin, wondering, that is not a small thing to be. It is one of the oldest inheritances there is. And here is one more thing to hold about that long descent, because it changes how you picture the whole event. There was no single day of it. No morning when a furred mother gave birth to a naked child. It was never like that. The loss came so slowly that no one alive through it could ever have seen it happening at all. Each generation looked almost exactly like the one before. The hair thinned by a shade, grew a touch finer, a touch fainter, so little that no eye could mark the change in a lifetime, or in 100 lifetimes. A child was born looking just like its parents, and yet, across thousands upon thousands of those imperceptible steps, the coat drained away, hair by hair, age by age, until one kind of creature had quietly become another. That is how the deep changes of life almost always happen. Not in a flash, not in a single strange birth, but in a slow tide, far too slow to watch, moving beneath a surface that looks unchanged from one day to the next. So when you try to picture the losing of the fur, do not picture a moment. Picture a current, a long, patient, invisible current running for 1,000,000 years beneath a line of ordinary lives, each one certain that nothing at all was changing, while everything, slowly, changed. No one saw it happen. No one could have. And that too is part of why the question is so hard, and so beautiful to ask. And here is a small thing that seals the case, and that you can see with your own eyes even now in the world around you. The colour of skin tracks the sun. Follow your ancestors as they later spread out of Africa, tens of thousands of years ago, into the cloudy north, into lands where the sun hangs low and pale, where the winters are long and grey, where that fierce equatorial light never falls. In those dim northern lands, the deep dark skin that had been such a shield in Africa became, gently, a small problem of its own. Because you do need a little of the sun. A little of that same light, in the right amount, lets your skin make something the whole body depends on to build strong bone. Too much sun in Africa was a danger, and dark skin was the answer. Too little sun in the north was a different danger. And there, over many generations, the skin slowly lightened again, to let more of the weak northern light come through. The very same force, the sun, pushing the colour one way near the equator and the other way near the poles. And that is why, to this day, the peoples of the world are coloured in a great graded band that follows the strength of the sunlight, dark near the middle of the earth and lighter toward its ends. It is the clearest proof you could ask for that skin colour is the sun's own signature, written on the body. And it means that when the fur first came away, and the bare skin first met the African sun, that skin could only have gone one direction. Dark. There was no other way to live. And here is where it gets stranger yet, because this clue, clear as it is, only deepens the question rather than closing it. For if the fur went that very long ago, for the sake of cooling the running body and shielding the bared skin, then we are left standing before a new and even stranger puzzle. Why did no other animal on that same hot plain, under that same fierce and identical sun, ever do the very same thing? The antelope kept its coat. The lion kept its coat. The zebra, the wildebeest, the gazelle, all kept their coats to this very day. And the baboon, a fellow primate, walking the ground right there beside your ancestors, in the very same heat, under the very same sun, facing the very same problems, the baboon kept its thick coat, and keeps it to this day. They all faced the identical sun, they all faced the identical heat, and only your one line, out of all of them, went bare. So heat and light, powerful as they are, cannot possibly be the whole of the answer. Because if they were the whole answer, then the plains of Africa would be crowded with naked animals, all of them cooled and bared by the same sun. And they are not. There is only you, only ever you. Hold on tightly to that strange fact as we go on. It is the crack that runs through every simple story we can tell. And it is through that crack that the other ideas come quietly in. And when you go looking, across the whole animal kingdom, for the other naked creatures, the ones who did what you did, you find how very rare and strange the road really is. There is a small blind rodent that lives its whole life underground, in the close dark of its tunnels, in crowded burrows where it never meets the wind or the sun, and it too went nearly bare, because underground, in a crowded burrow packed with bodies, a coat is simply useless. And so it faded away. There is the pig, which loses much of its coat and wallows in mud and cool water to manage its heat. There is a strange little water rat, and a few others. But look at them. Every one is an animal of some peculiar narrow world, underground or half in the water, or grown to a giant's size or gone back to the sea. Not one of them is a creature like you. Not one is a medium-sized animal walking about in the open air, under the sky, in the ordinary weather of the world, and yet bare. In all the earth, in all its millions of kinds, you stand very nearly alone in that. An open-air animal of modest size, walking upright in the wind, with no coat at all. It is worth letting that loneliness land on you. Whatever happened to your line happened almost nowhere else, in all the long history of life. That is exactly what makes it a mystery worth a whole night's wondering. It was not a common road. It was very nearly a road of one. And you can feel that loneliness, if you like, right now, tonight, all around the sleeping world. Think of the animals asleep this very hour, across the whole earth, the dog curled by someone's bed, wrapped in its own coat. The cat asleep on a chair, furred nose to furred tail. The horse standing in its field, the fox in its den, the deer bedded down in the wood, the bird with its feathers fluffed against the night. Every one of them sleeps in the covering it was born in, needing nothing more. And then, think of the people, in every house, in every city, in every land. The one animal that must pull something over itself to sleep. The one that reaches for a blanket, that closes a window against the draught, that keeps a fire or a warm current of air moving through the walls all night. Across the whole turning planet, in this single hour, the furred creatures sleep bare-born and covered, and the one naked creature sleeps beneath the coverings it made. You are, in that small nightly act of drawing up the blanket, doing a thing no other large animal on Earth needs to do. Repeating, without knowing it, the oldest human answer to the oldest human problem. You lost the coat. So every night, you make one. Feel that as you lie there. You are not alone in the dark, but you are, in this one strange way, unlike nearly everything else that sleeps tonight. So let us follow one of those other ideas now, out through the crack, because it leads us somewhere unexpected. It suggests that you may not have lost your fur to beat the heat at all. It suggests instead that you may have lost it to escape something very small, and biting, and alive. Think once more about what a coat of fur truly is, but this time from the point of view of a very, very small creature. To a flea, to a tick, to a louse, to a burrowing mite, a large living animal's coat of fur is not a burden or a problem at all. It is a paradise. It is a deep, sheltered, hidden forest, endless and safe, full of 1,000 hiding places, protected from the wind and hidden from the light, and always close, always within easy reach of the living blood that is their only food. Fur is where the little parasites live. Fur is their whole world. And the thicker and the deeper and the denser the coat, the more of them it can shelter and hide and feed. And these small passengers are no small matter to the animal that carries them. They carry disease from body to body. They drain away blood, drop by drop, day and night. They lay their eggs pressed tight against the living skin. For a wild animal, the little biting passengers hidden in its fur can be a lifelong torment, an itching, draining, sickening burden, and sometimes, through the diseases they carry, a slow killer. Now here is the idea, offered gently. What if bare skin was worth having, all on its own, simply because it left the parasites nowhere at all to hide? Think about it. A naked body is a very hard place indeed to be a flea. There is no deep, dark forest of hair to shelter down inside. There is nowhere to cling out of reach. There is nowhere to hide from the searching, grooming hand, or from the bright and killing light of the open day. On bare skin, every single parasite is exposed, out in the open, visible, vulnerable. It can be seen. It can be found. It can be picked off between two fingers. It cannot build the great teeming hidden colonies that thrive so easily in the depths of a thick coat. So perhaps, the thinking runs, your ancestors slowly shed their fur in order to shed their unwanted passengers, to make their own bodies a poorer and harsher home for the biting things, and so to carry less disease, and so to fall ill less often, and so, in the end, to raise more children who live to grow up and have children of their own. It is a plausible thought. And there is genuinely something to it. It fits certain facts that the pure heat idea struggles to explain. It might help to explain, for one thing, why you kept your hair in a few particular places, even while losing it almost everywhere else across the body. The thick hair of your head, for instance, which shields the tender top of your skull from the fierce vertical noon sun beating straight down from overhead. And the small remaining patches of hair that grow at the hidden folds and hollows of the body, which some scholars think may once have served as places to gather and to spread scent, back in the deep past when smell mattered a great deal more to your kind than it does now. Look at where those last tufts of body hair stayed. In the hollows of the underarms and at the fork of the body. Odd places when you think about it, for hair to make its last stand. But those are exactly the places where the skin holds a different kind of gland, a kind that does not make watery cooling sweat, but a thicker, richer secretion, one carrying scent. And a tuft of hair over such a gland does a particular job. It holds the scent and spreads it and lifts it into the air, the way a wick lifts the smell of a candle. So perhaps the hair stayed in those few places precisely because there it was useful for a wholly different reason than warmth or shade. it stayed to carry your smell. Back when your ancestors knew one another and drew near to one another and chose one another partly by scent, those small patches of hair were faint signposts, sending a private message on the air. You barely notice it now. But it is there yet, that old language of scent, working somewhere beneath your knowing, in the very places the coat refused to fully leave. A story told purely about heat and cooling has to strain quite hard to explain these odd surviving patches. Why keep any hair at all, if hair is the enemy of cooling? But a story told about parasites and about signalling has an easier time of it. Keep the hair where it earns its keep. Lose it everywhere else, where it only shelters the biting things. But this idea, too, has a soft and yielding place in it, the moment you press upon it with any weight. Because if bare skin were simply plainly better for keeping the parasites away, then once again we are forced to ask that same stubborn, ringing question. Why, then, did all the other animals not do it too? The baboon suffers its own ticks and its own lice and its own mites, and yet the baboon keeps its full coat all the same to this day and grooms it and lives. Every furred animal on earth carries parasites, every single one, and the vast, overwhelming majority of them never once went bare to be rid of the burden. They found other ways to bear it instead. They groom one another, hour after patient hour. They bathe in dust. They roll and scratch and pick and clean. So the parasite idea, exactly like the heat idea before it, explains something real and true. But it cannot stand up all alone, because it cannot answer that one ringing question. It cannot explain why you and you only, out of all the furred and parasite-burdened animals in the whole world, took this one strange and lonely road that stood open to every one of them and was walked by almost none. There is one more idea in this same family, and it is a stranger one, and I will give it to you honestly, along with its trouble. Some have wondered whether the answer lies not on the plain at all, but in the water, whether for some long stretch of the deep past your ancestors waded and swam and gathered food along the shores of lakes and rivers and seas, and lost their fur the way the whale and the dolphin and the hippopotamus did, because in the water a coat only drags and chills. It is an appealing thought, and it seems to explain a handful of odd little facts about you at once. But when careful minds examined it closely, they found it did not truly hold together. The evidence for such a watery age is thin, and the same odd facts are better explained by other, plainer causes. Most who study this now set the watery idea gently to one side. I tell it to you not because it is likely true, but because honesty requires it, and because it shows you something worth seeing. How many doors have been tried, and how many have been found, in the end, to lead nowhere. That is the shape of a real mystery. Many attempts, few certainties, and a great deal of patient, honest doubt. And there is something worth admiring in how the people who study this hold that doubt. They do not pretend to a certainty they have not got. Ask the finest of them when your ancestors lost their fur, and why, and the honest ones will not give you a single tidy answer. They will give you the sweat, and the lice, and the colour, and the running, and the choosing eye, and then they will tell you plainly which parts are firm and which are guesses, and where the evidence runs out, and where the honest person simply says, "We do not know." That is not weakness. That is the very strength of the thing. A mystery held honestly, with all its loose threads showing, is worth far more than a false answer wrapped up neat. The gaps are not failures to be papered over. The gaps are the truest part of the map. They mark the places where the skin rotted away, where the deep time swallowed the evidence, where the question stands open and waiting. And there is a real comfort in that, if you let there be. You are not being told a story that pretends to know everything. You are being handed a real and open question, exactly as real people hold it, with all its uncertainty intact. That is a rarer and a finer thing than a neat ending. It is the truth offered plainly, doubts and all. And so we arrive, as every honest detective eventually must, at the humbling truth that sits at the very centre of the whole matter. Each idea we hold in our hands tonight holds a real piece of the truth. And not one single idea holds all of it. The heat explains the sweat, but not the freezing nights. The parasites explain the leftover patches, but not why you and only you went bare. The colour of the skin tells us wonderfully when, but not fully why. We are turning a cut jewel slowly in a low light, and each flat face of it flashes bright for one moment, and then turns away and goes dark, and another face catches the light and flares up in its turn. That is not a failure of the long search. Please understand that. It is the true nature of the thing itself. It is genuinely, deeply, honestly uncertain. And the very people who have studied it the longest and the hardest are always the first to say so out loud. Which brings us near the end now to one more idea. And it is perhaps the most human idea of them all. It says that the fur may have been lost not for the sake of the body at all, not for cooling and not for cleanliness, but for the sake of the eye, for beauty, for love. Consider for a moment how very much of the whole living animal world is shaped not by bare survival, but by attraction, by what one creature finds beautiful in another. The great shimmering tail of the peacock does nothing whatsoever to help the bird to survive. Nothing. It is heavy to carry. It is bright and easy to see, and so it makes the bird easier for a fox to catch. By every rule of plain survival, that tail should never have grown at all. And yet it grew, and spread, and became ever more vast and magnificent across the long ages, for one reason, and one reason only. Because the peahens preferred it. Because generation after generation, the males who wore the finer, wider, more dazzling tails were the ones chosen as mates, and so they left behind the most young, and so they passed the fine tail on to another generation, which made it finer yet. This is one of the oldest and most powerful shaping forces in all of life. Not what helps a creature to survive, but simply what its own kind happens to find beautiful. And this force alone, given enough time, can carve a living body into shapes that plain survival could never begin to explain. So here, gently, is the thought. What if bare skin, over the long ages, simply became beautiful to your ancestors? What if a smoother skin, a finer and fainter coat, came to be seen and felt as the mark of a fine and healthy mate, for the simple reason that clear bare skin shows its own health openly, and honestly, hiding nothing? Think about it. A thick coat of fur can hide a great deal. It can hide sores and scars and the crawling passengers and the marks of sickness. It can tell a lie about the body beneath it. But bare skin hides nothing at all. Bare skin shows everything, plainly, for anyone to read at a glance. It shows youth, it shows health, it shows cleanliness and freedom from disease and the smoothness of an unburdened body. And if your ancestors slowly came to prefer that barer, clearer, more honest skin in the mates they chose, to seek it out, to be drawn to it, to find it lovely, then the fur would have thinned away across the generations for that reason alone, quite apart from any question of heat, or hunting, or parasites. Chosen away, simply for being fair to look upon, simply for being loved. And this idea carries a real and particular strength, one that no other idea we have tonight can quite match. it can explain the one thing that all the others cannot, that ringing question of why you and no other. Because beauty is not the same thing from one kind of animal to the next. Not at all. What one species finds lovely and longs for, another does not even notice or finds strange or plain. And so a preference for bare skin could easily have arisen in one single line, your ancestors, and in no other line anywhere, purely by the accident of what your particular ancestors happened to come to find beautiful in one another. It does not have to happen to the baboon, or the antelope, or the lion, because their eyes were simply never turned that way, and never came to love that thing. This is perhaps the only one of all our ideas that naturally, easily explains why the naked ape is one, and alone, in all the world. And there is a curious detail folded up inside this idea, a detail hiding in plain sight on the bodies all around you. Because to this very day, right across your whole kind, across every people on the earth, men tend to grow rather more hair upon their faces and their bodies than women do. The difference is not large, but it is real, and it is steady, and it is exactly the kind of small, patterned difference between the two that the great shaping force of beauty tends to leave behind, like a fingerprint pressed into clay. It faintly hints that attraction, that choosing, really did play some true part in the shaping of your bare skin. But it does not, in the end, tell us whether beauty led the way from the very start, or whether beauty merely followed along afterward, polishing and finishing a nakedness that heat and health and the long chase had already begun. Perhaps the fur first thinned for cooling out on the burning plain long ago, and perhaps only later did beauty take up the very same direction and carry it further and finer than survival alone ever would have. You can see the fingerprints of that choosing eye in one more place if you look. Think of the beard. On the very same face that went otherwise bare, on the very same body stripped of nearly all its coat, the men of your kind grow a thick patch of hair across the jaw and chin. It serves no cooling, it sheds no parasites, it shades nothing that needs shading. By the plain logic of survival, it makes little sense at all, but by the logic of the choosing eye, it makes perfect sense. It is a signal, a banner, a thing grown to be seen and read, a mark of a certain age, a certain maturity, worn openly on the face for others to notice. It is a small living argument that beauty and signalling really did have a hand in the shaping of your hair, adding here, subtracting there, keeping a patch on the jaw while sweeping the coat from the back and the limbs. Your hair, where it stayed and where it went, is not one simple story. It is a negotiation between many needs, and the eye of the beholder was one of the voices at the table. There is a gentler cousin to this idea too, and it is worth a moment, because it may be the gentlest truth of all. Look closely at a chimpanzee when it is very young. A newborn chimp has far less hair on its face than its parents. It is barer, softer, rounder, more open-faced than the grown animal it will become. And here is the curious thing about you. In many ways you look, your whole life long, a little like a young ape that never fully grew up. Your flat face, your high round forehead, your fine faint hair, these are in a sense the features of an ape infant, kept and carried on into your adult years. It is as if your line simply slowed down one part of its growing up, and stopped somewhere in the middle and never put on the heavy adult coat at all. Perhaps the nakedness was not chosen for its own sake at all. Perhaps it came along unbidden, as a kind of side effect, riding on the back of some deeper change, a change that kept you young-faced and curious and open your whole life through, the better to keep learning and playing and growing, long after other apes have hardened into their grown selves. It is only one more idea. but it is a lovely one to hold, that your bare skin may be, in part, the mark of a creature that never quite stopped being a child. So let all of these settle down over you now. The heat, the chase, the sun, the parasites, the choosing eye, the young face that never aged. Because the honest truth, the truth the wisest minds keep returning to, is that there may be no single, simple answer at all. The truth of it may be a braid, a weaving together of several answers at once, wound around one another across more than 1,000,000 years, no one single strand of them being the whole of it. All of them, perhaps, pulling in the same strange direction across the deep ages toward the naked skin that you are wearing at this very moment. All of them, together, making you. And before we come at last to the end, let us pause together once more, just briefly. Wherever you have drifted to by now, whatever the hour that glows beside you, however heavy your body has grown against the bed or the chair, thank you for staying here in the dark with this old question, and with me. Some of you began this in the deep of the night, and for you the world outside has grown even more silent since we started. Some of you began it as the light was fading, and now full dark has come down over your town. And someone, somewhere, is hearing these very words as a slow grey dawn begins to lift beyond the window. Wherever you are on the great turning wheel of the world, you are welcome here, and there is no hurry, and we are nearly home. Let us go the last small distance together, because now near the end let us return to the gentlest truth of all, the one we touched upon at the very beginning, and then set aside, and have been circling ever since. The truth that you never truly lost your fur at all. Run your hand once more, slowly, along your own bare arm, there in the dark. Feel the fine, near invisible down that covers you, everywhere from wrist to shoulder. It is so easy to forget that it is even there. But it is hair, true hair, real hair, growing patiently from the very same follicles that your furred ancestors carried, and in very nearly the same number as a chimpanzee carries today. You did not lose the coat. Understand that clearly now at the end. You kept every single root of it. You kept every follicle, every place where hair should be. You only turned the coat down. Down and down to the faintest whisper, until the bare skin at last showed through, and the sun could reach it, and the sweat could dry from it in the moving wind. And somewhere in the deep instructions of your body, the old blueprint for a full and proper coat is written down, in full, there, complete, only hushed and held silent. Now and then, even now, a child is born, even so, wearing it, born covered all over in a fine soft hair, a startling echo of the ancient furred ancestor that all of you share. A living reminder, arriving in the world, of the coat your whole line laid down so very long ago, and never quite threw away. You have other small reminders too, faint ghosts of the old coat, and you carry them every day without a thought. When you grow cold, or when something moves you deeply, the fine hairs on your arms stand suddenly up on end, and the skin around them puckers into tiny risen points. You call it gooseflesh. It is a small, useless gesture now, a reflex left over from an older body. In a furred animal, that same reflex lifts the whole coat up and away from the skin, puffing it out, trapping a thicker cushion of air within it against the cold, or making the animal look suddenly larger and fiercer to a rival. Your body gives that ancient signal, faithfully, every cold morning of your life. The tiny muscles tug obediently at the roots of hairs that are no longer there to be raised. It is a salute from a coat that is gone, a memory the skin cannot let go of. Feel it the next cold morning, and know it for what it is, a small echo of the fur living on in you. And look, while we are here, at the few places where the hair did stay, thick and dark and visible, right up to this day, because each surviving patch is a small clue in itself. The hair of your head remained, shielding the top of your skull, the part of you nearest the vertical noon sun, from that fierce overhead light. Your eyebrows remained, two small ridges of hair set just above your eyes, turning the running sweat and the falling rain aside, out and away, so that it does not stream down into your sight. Your eyelashes remained, a fine fringe guarding the eye itself from dust and grit and glare. In each place the hair earned its keep, and so the hair stayed. Everywhere else, where the coat only trapped the heat and sheltered the biting things, it thinned away to nothing. Your body is a map, if you know how to read it, of a long, slow negotiation, this patch worth keeping, this patch worth losing, drawn out across 1,000,000 years and written, in the end, upon the very skin you are lying in. And the losing of the coat changed the deepest thing of all. It changed how a mother holds her child. Think of any other ape, and think of its baby. A newborn chimpanzee, in the first hour of its life, reaches up and takes 2 fistfuls of its mother's hair and holds on and does not let go. It rides there, clinging to the fur of her chest and back, gripping tight while she climbs and walks and feeds, carried everywhere by its own small grip on her coat. That is how an ape baby travels through the world. It holds the fur. But your ancestors lost the fur. And so there came a day, somewhere in that deep past, when a mother looked down at her newborn and it had nothing to hold, no coat to grip, no handful of hair to cling to, nothing but her bare skin, which it could not grasp. Feel the size of that small change. From that day forward, the mother had to hold the baby. She had to take it up in her arms and carry it and keep it against her, because it could no longer carry itself. The naked skin turned the parent's arms into the only cradle there was. And think what that one change set in motion. A baby that must be carried is a baby whose mother's hands are full. A baby held in the arms, face to face, instead of clinging behind, is a baby that looks up into a face, and is looked down upon all day long, eye to eye. Some believe that this endless holding, this face turned to face, is part of why your kind grew so bound to one another, so full of looking and reading and answering the faces of others. The bare skin took the baby off the back and put it into the arms and into the gaze and into the long, slow closeness of being carried by someone who loves you. You began your own life exactly this way. Held, carried, looked at. And behind that first holding, if we follow the thread all the way down, lies the losing of the fur. And the bareness changed all your touching, not only the holding of children. A furred animal, when it draws close to another, touches fur to fur, hair to hair, and never truly reaches the skin at all. But you have no such veil. When you take another person's hand, you touch skin to skin, heat against heat, with nothing between. When you are held, when you are embraced, it is bare skin against bare skin. The whole surface of you open and undefended and alive to the touch. That closeness, that skin laid directly against skin, is a human thing, made possible by the losing of the coat. The apes groom each other, combing patiently through the fur for hours, and that is their great act of closeness and care. You lost the fur to comb, but you gained, in its place, the bare embrace, the hand on the shoulder, the held hand in the dark. Whatever it cost you, the naked skin gave you this, a body that can be truly, fully touched. Let that be part of the mystery too. that the same bareness which left you cold at night left you open, forever after, to the warmth of another person's skin. So you are not, in the end, truly the naked ape. Not really. You are the quieted ape, the hushed ape, the ape whose fur went fine and faint and pale, and let the light come in, and let the heat pour out, and left the skin bare to the open sky and to the choosing, loving eye. And that great quieting, precious as it was, cost you something real and lasting, something we should name before we rest. Because a bare body is a cold body the moment the sun goes down, and so the loss of your fur made you, forever after, from that day to this one, a creature who needs. You cannot lie down and sleep upon the open ground in the cold as a wolf can, wrapped safe in its own coat. You lost that. When you lost the coat, you gave that away, and to survive the loss, to live at all through the cold, dark half of the world, your ancestors had to invent, slowly and painfully across the ages, all the things that would stand in for the coat they had shed. They had to learn to master fire, to hold a small trembling pool of warmth against the great cold of the night. They had to learn to take the shed skins of the furrier animals and wrap themselves within them, borrowing at last the very coats they no longer grew upon their own bodies. They had to learn to build shelter, walls and roofs, and closed spaces, to keep the cold and the wind and the rain away from their bare skin while they slept. Everything, the hearth and the clothing and the house, and the very room around you now, with its four walls and its heated air holding the night out, all of it, in a distant way, grew up out of that one ancient nakedness. You built a whole world of warmth, over hundreds of thousands of years, precisely because you had once given away the warmth you were born wearing. The fire in the old cave and the blanket over you tonight are the long, patient, far-off children of the lost fur. And notice how the whole shape of a human home follows from it. Why do your kind gather at evening into a single lit and heated room and draw close and stay? Part of the answer is simply that you had to. A furred animal can scatter and sleep alone anywhere, its coat goes with it. But a bare creature, in the cold, does better pressed close to others and close to the fire. So the losing of the fur may have helped to pull your ancestors together each night, into the ring of firelight, into the same sheltered place, again and again, generation upon generation. And what happens when creatures gather close, night after night, around a fire, with the dark held off and a little time before sleep? They talk, they remember, they tell. The stories, the songs, the long slow passing down of everything one generation knew to the next, all of it may owe something to that nightly gathering, and the gathering may owe something to the cold, and the cold to the bare skin. Pull the thread, and it runs a long way. From a naked body on a hot plain, to a fire in the dark, to a circle of faces, to the whole handed-down inheritance of being human. It is only a possibility, one thread among many, but it is a moving one to hold, that the warmth you make each night and the closeness you make it in may be among the deepest gifts the lost fur left behind. There is something astonishing in that when you let it settle over you. The most human things you have, the gathering close around the fire, the making and the wearing of clothes, the building of a home to sleep in, may all trace back, in the very end, to a single bare skin, drying its sweat on a hot African plain more than 1,000,000 years ago. You became a maker of warmth, precisely because you had stopped being a natural wearer of it. You traded the coat you were freely given for the coat that you could make with your own hands and your own mind. And in the slow patient learning of how to make it, across all those ages, you became something that the world had never seen before, and has never seen since. A creature that carries its warmth outside its own skin. A creature that builds its coat anew, every night, out of fire and cloth and walls and love. And so, at last, we come to rest, with a mystery yet open in our hands, exactly the way the very best mysteries always are, and always should be. When did your ancestors lose their fur? Deep in the past. Deeper, far deeper, than most people ever guess. More than 1,000,000 years ago, most likely, in the age of an ancestor older than your own kind of human, if the slow darkening of the skin is truly the clue we believe it to be. And why did it happen? Here, at the end, we must be honest, gently and completely honest, in just the way that the finest and wisest minds who study this are honest. We do not fully know. We may never fully know. Perhaps the fur was lost to cool the running body under the high noon sun. Perhaps to shed the biting passengers hidden in the coat. Perhaps because bare skin, health worn openly for all to see, became beautiful to the choosing eye, and was loved, and so was chosen. Perhaps because a young and open face, an ape that never quite grew up, carried its bareness along with all its curiosity. Perhaps a little of each of these, all braided together across an unimaginable span of deep time, with no single thread of it being the whole of the answer. The direct proof, the actual skin of the actual creature, rotted away into the African earth a full 1,000,000 years before there was any mind on earth able to stand up and ask the question. And so the case, in truth, can never be entirely closed. We can only reason our way inward toward it, patiently, from the sweat, and the lice, and the colour of the skin, and the shape of the ancient land. And we hold it, gently, in the open palm of the mind. Unresolved, alive, ours, and perhaps that is exactly as it should be. Some questions are not meant to be snapped shut like a box. Some are meant to be carried, and turned and wandered across a whole life, and handed on to the next person still open. This is one of those. Every clue we have only sharpens it. Every answer we try only shows us another face of it. And the more we learn, the more we understand that the losing of the fur was not one thing with one cause, but a great knot of causes, tied slowly together over an age longer than the mind can hold. The sweat and the sun and the chase and the biting things and the choosing eye, all pulling at once over 1,000,000 years on a body that was becoming yours. You will not solve it tonight, neither will anyone, and there is something right in that, something that lets the wonder stay alive instead of hardening into a fact you would forget by morning. But of this one thing you can be entirely sure, lying there now in the warmth and the dark. It happened. It truly, truly happened. Somewhere out on a wide golden plain, under an enormous open sky, across more slow years than your mind can hold, your ancestors' coats grew fine and faint and let the whole living world touch their skin directly for the very first time. And every naked skin, in every quiet room, in every city and every house on the turning earth tonight, is the far and living end of that one long, slow, patient, mysterious change. You do not have to go anywhere to find the mystery. You do not have to dig it up out of the ground. You carry the answer and the question both upon your own body this very moment. You are the mystery, resting, warm, in the dark. Think of it this way as you lie there. Every clue we followed all night is written somewhere on you, right now. The millions of sweat wells across your skin, the mark of the cooling, of the running, of the noon that became yours, the fine faint down on your arms, the ghost of the coat, hushed but never erased, The colour of your skin, whatever it is, the sun's own signature, dark or light, according to how strong the light fell on the land your ancestors came from. The lift of goose flesh on a cold morning, the salute of a coat that is gone, the beard, the eyebrows, the hair of the head, the few patches that earned their keep and stayed, the hidden lining of fat beneath the skin, the inner coat that grew as the outer one thinned. You are not merely the subject of this mystery. You are its document. Every answer we have, and every doubt, is set down in your own flesh, and you have carried the whole story with you into this room, into this bed, into this hour, without ever once having to read a word of it. So the search does not end in a library, or a cave, or a far-off dig in the African earth. It ends here, with you, where it has been all along. You are the mystery. Resting in the dark. So let the old question stay open beside you now, gently, like a single candle left to burn low in the corner of the room. There is no need at all to solve it tonight. It has waited, patient and unhurried, for more than 1,000,000 years. It can surely wait a little longer, while the room grows heavy and still around you, and the great sky turns slowly on beyond the walls. And you, the quieted ape, the maker of warmth, the far and gentle child of a bare skin on an ancient sunlit plain, you rest easy, at long last, beneath a roof that your own kind learned to build against the very cold that your lost fur once left behind. Rest now. The old question will be here yet, waiting, patient and kind, whenever you should wish to return to it. And so always will I. Sleep well.